With Voice of America TV. Mr. Twilley, you commented just a bit on the hurricane danger, and you mentioned how salt and instead of the salt, oil would be going on land. There are two theories with regard to a hurricane that I've heard. One is that it will actually dissipate the oil with the wind and the churning up of the water. The second is your theory about it coming on land. I'm wondering which theory you ascribe to and why. And then secondly, if it does come on land, how does that affect our groundwater and hence our drinking water?
Well, I don't know if the two theories conflict. But what we just briefed the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness 2 days ago about, we call it HurSlick. Instead of a hurricane. And we went through the scenarios that you just described, and there are a couple of assumptions, and we've been working with some of the other universities on this. One of the assumptions is the mixing may be down around 200 feet during, of course that's really dependent on the storm and the track and where it enters the Gulf and et cetera. So you may be looking at that depth at which the oil will be impacted, and it will have a huge impact because it actually dissipates hypoxia. When we get a hurricane, that destratification, which means you basically have different parts of the water that are stacked on top of one another in the Gulf of Mexico, and that bottom water gets isolated, and that's where your hypoxia actually results from, is the fact that it's that isolated. And when a hurricane comes along, we do see the mixing of that water. So, the key there is, well, what concentration will that oil be, and how will that mixing affect that concentration? And that's a really good question. We're not really sure the answer to that. And so the measurements that are being taken and the analysis that are being done right now are very important to address your first theory. So, and it could be that it might dilute and change the concentration of oil. But why I say they're not conflicting is that the second part of your theory, I think, was the transport of that oil, and so and distance inland, and of course the key message there is again it's going to be very hard to calculate the concentration because that will define the effect. But what our concern is that when you add salt in these environments and oil, you could actually have a double whammy, if you will, a double event that these wetlands will be dealing with. Remember, we're talking about wetlands that are in the interior, the freshwater regions, right? That's the zone that we're most concerned and we see most impact from hurricanes. And so that will be something that we won't know actually until the event occurs. I mean, to be honest, we think it is going to be something we deal with. First responders are going to have to deal with the fact that all of a sudden you may have oil in certain areas you're moving back to. We don't think that's going to be a real issue, but that's another consideration, concern, discussion that we've had. And so the whole natural and human element of oil moving farther inland with a hurricane is something that we're doing a lot of talking about, and we don't have all your answers, and it's really going to be very site specific. And we really won't know until we go out and see right after a hurricane what we're dealing with.
But a possibility that the drinking water will be contaminated? Or not?
Again, that's very concentration dependent. We have not seen, for example, if you go to Gustav and Ike, and Rita is a really good example. We did not see drinking water supplies. There might have been 1 or 2 instances where drinking water supply was impacted from salt. Okay, so I think the key here is you're not going to see any more, I think, impacts from oil than you're already going to have as far as impacts from salt to drinking water. And what we really had, though, was the agriculture business in the western part of the state. This is one of the second largest rice producing regions of the United States next to California. And that area was hammered by the salt that moved in from Rita. And that water supply for irrigation and agricultural purposes and et cetera, that's where, and livestock, that's going to be, and with now having oil in that as well, potentially, is going to really complicate, how we deal with hurricane recovery.
There was the hand in the back somewhere before the film in the front. Well, the man in the front and then the lady in the green dress.
Do you think there's a...
Give me name and affiliation.
Oh, you Grindstaff, and another press card. do you think there's a need to have a quick reaction team set up now, funded by both the industry and the government, in case the spill happens again? It's a learning experience this time. The next time shouldn't be a learning experience. They should have the materials and the facilities already set up.
Well, I think we have a reaction team in progress right now, huge, thousands of men that are at work. One of my big concerns is that there might be another spill somewhere else in the Gulf, particularly along the Texas coast, and all of our resources have been drained off to this spill. All the booms are gone, all the skimmers are gone, everything is to cope with this massive spill, and probably as it should be, but we have a spill somewhere else, and we're kind of hanging out there naked, wondering what we're going to do.
So you think there would be a need to set up such an organization?
There's probably a need for lots of things. Additional research on drilling at these deep depths and preventative measures. What you're going to do if this happens again. Should we be drilling in these areas where these methyl hydrate beds occur? You know, there's lots of things that probably, well, by the very nature that the spill exists, were not covered adequately previous to it. So, yes.
Yeah, I was,
This custodian's not getting enough airtime.
you know, the Ocean 90, Op 90 was a huge change in structure of the governments related to Exxon Valdez, and I hope that you will see a revisit to that procedure as lessons learned from this event. And I think there is a key fundamental difference, and that is that the technology of drilling deeper and deeper in the ocean has actually been phenomenal. The scenario analysis of a worst case scenario and the fact that you can isolate impacts at 5,000 feet and 50 miles offshore from what risks are associated with onshore is been one of the main fallacies of this entire approach to deep water drilling. And we know now there are huge risks. And so how you deal with events that are occurring at the site, 50 miles offshore, and at the same time balance your assets and responses to and predictions of trajectories and impacts onshore are critical now, because I think they were ignored prior to this event. And again, this whole issue of dispersants and how we deal with dispersants, and do we manage the risk on the surface, or do we manage, allowing the oil to disperse and move into these other currents, and the long-term impacts, and the fact that you may have oil through the Florida Straits up the Atlantic seaboard. Those are scenarios we need to really look at and extend what risk we're talking about to large coastal areas.
Before we go to our last questions, the lady in the chartreuse dress, Laura, you're trying to send me a signal. I can't tell you.
I just had a question as well.
Oh, okay.
So-
Then you're the last question.
Okay.
Go ahead.